Hello, sir. We would like to welcome John Paul L. Zaldarriaga, policy lobbyist and the Manila Times contributor. Thank you, sir, for coming so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yesterday, during the Manila dialogue, we had a bit of a weird conversation because when it came to the Philippines and its quote-unquote aggressiveness, it was just the Philippines. But for the ASEAN member states that were present, it all of a sudden became a we question. Why is it that when it comes to this specific dialogue, ASEAN seems to just not be in, just seems won't get behind us?
Well, simply put, the ASEAN would prefer the code of conduct, which has taken a long time at this point, I think 15 to 20 years right now. And I'm of the opinion that ASEAN would prefer a certain form of action that wouldn't have the advantage for Philippine interests in particular. Why? ASEAN would prefer a system in which they would have coordinated relations, economic relations in point, with China. However, the Philippines has another fight. We have a fight that includes barring China from economic, social, and security corridors. So that my answer for there would be, simply put, we have to have a different path. As Dean Megadula also said a while ago, the ASEAN way is something that is very vague, and the Philippines cannot put its policies or plan on that presumption.
And speaking on that point, the Philippines helms the chair for ASEAN 2026. And one of the things that President Marcos wants to push forward is a COC. Given what we've seen yesterday during the Manila dialogue, can we just see more of that where it's just vague speeches or somewhat false promises or like a lift of a handshake, so to speak?
I think we can see from yesterday's forum that many of our ASEAN colleagues have quite a vague way to resolve the situation, none that benefits us and particularly our national interests, nor even their national interests for that matter. I believe that we as a country would have a better... Sorry, what's your question, Edith?
Will we see more of the same when it comes to ASEAN Summit?
Well, if we do carry the ASEAN chairmanship this year, and we are this 2026, I believe that somehow we will be able to steer ASEAN towards our view of the matter. However, I must stress that ASEAN will not always agree with us and that we must have our policies and plan our national security looking beyond ASEAN as a whole. But I do believe that if the code of conduct does push through and it will be finished by the chairmanship of the Philippines under Bongbong Marcos, we will be able to steer it to our national interests, and I trust our policymakers to do so.
That's a good point. One of the questions that wasn't answered last night was China has held 30 years of dialogue with ASEAN, yet somehow it still builds bases. It still continues to assert itself in the EEZs of Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines. How exactly can we trust China's word when their actions don't complement?
Precisely. I think the code of conduct is only one layer of our diplomacy. Perhaps, in essence, it's just saving face, in the front of our ASEAN's neighbors. But in reality, as you mentioned, China infiltrates Malaysia's, even Vietnam's easy. But I think in the Philippines, it's another matter. Since it's just not very easy that our easy for that matter, that they're trying to violate, but they are also trying to infiltrate economic corridors in the private sector, which is not done to other countries. For instance, Vietnam and China does not coerce Vietnam economically or for anything for that matter. But when it comes to the Philippines, China has a certain doctrine against us, which I read before, it's called the Gerasimov Doctrine, or what they say is waging war without firing a single bullet. And I believe in ASEAN that is the only country that China has the tactic or strategy on. So I believe that that's what makes us fundamentally different from them.
Earlier this morning, we heard from panelists like retired Justice Carpio and Dr. Wu, the representative of China. They had an intense back and forth when it came to the historical rights of the South China Sea. Who was fishing who claimed what map does this, what map did that. How would you say that these back and forths are they a healthy form of conversation, or is it just talking to a brick wall?
To be quite frankly, it is like talking to a brick wall. Because as long as China still bases its claim on historical rights and not the rule of law, it will never have progress with regards to the code of conduct or even so. Because as a situation that I could see in a few years is we could have the code of conduct by next year, but in 2 years' time, we will still have conversations like that in which the Chinese delegates will still continue stressing about historical rights, and we cannot move onto thinking on matters from rule of law and UNCLOS.
That's a good point. And going to that point, we also had a panel where it was the ambassadors of Japan, Australia, France, Germany, and Germany. One of the questions I would ask was in relation to Taiwan. The question was proposed by Professor Castro, and that since the Philippines is it's just geolocated perfectly, and even President Marcos himself said we will be dragged into that mess whether we like it or not. So my question would be is that will these countries help us if ever it comes to that? Because even they have to walk a fine line when it comes to Taiwan. But to us, if China gets to Taiwan, it's essentially a loss for the Philippines as well.
So would other countries such as Australia, Japan for that matter, help
countries that have a visiting force agreement
would they help if Taiwan
yes.
is lost? Well, firstly, I must stress that for countries in the Indo-Pacific like Japan or Australia, we will see more direct involvement, at least aid to Taiwan, or at least maybe activate the VFA, even with Canada for that matter, if Taiwan is invaded by China, because we are the next target after that, after all. But for countries like Germany or France, whose interests in the Indo-Pacific are mostly based on their national interest of preserving free trade here, I don't think we are going to see armed support or anything of that sort, as it would not be in the national interest to do so. So that's my view, that countries in the Indo-Pacific will, of course, help us or other countries, U.S. allies in the region would as well. But France and Germany, very to a limited capacity only.
And going back to France and Germany, we see many more European countries or nations that weren't traditionally our talking partners suddenly wanting to talk with the Philippines. And my question essentially to you would be, what interests is it that they have in the region? Because for countries like Australia and Japan, we can just say that, because they're near the region, they're basically neighbors to us, so they have a stake in the region as well as the United States because of our MVT. But for European nations like the United Kingdom or like Canada or like most European nations, what exactly or why should they be in the region?
Canada, Germany, France, and other stakeholders who aren't in the region but are deeply engaged in the West Philippine Sea matter would simply be here because they wish to protect their trade interests. If anything would erupt here, it would affect their trade routes, their navy routes, and in essence, all their national interests there is to protect the freedom of navigation. No, that they will lose just in case China would invade us, Taiwan, or any other country in the Indo-Pacific due to disruption in regular sea and trade routes that crosses South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca.
One more question is that when it comes to the defense of the Philippines, everyone keeps talking about the West Philippine Sea, and rightfully so. It has the most activity out of any part of our archipelago. But but arguably another important part of our archipelago is the Luzon Strait. It is very important to China, it's very important to Taiwan, and it's very important to the Philippines. Would you like to see this strait also militarized by the Philippines for its defense, or will that only attract more flack from China?
It will attract more flack from China, but we must. If you look at geostrategy, there are three, no? There's the first island chain, which we are part of. The second island chain, no? If they cross the Taiwan Strait and into the second island chain, they can interrupt live marine ecosystems and our submarine cables in the Philippine Sea and the eastern seaboard. And another reason that we need to guard the Luzon Strait, and I will add also the Celebes Sea at the south, no, is that if we allow them to get to those corridors, they will get across the Philippine Sea and we will have to fight a war in another front. So my view there is we have to militarize or at least monitor the Luzon Strait. And for that matter, I have to stress to policymakers, we should also add the Celebes Sea or the Southern Seas as part of that initiative. Because The region is contested with many terrorists and perhaps many insurgencies as well. So it is another front that China could use to manipulate or weaken internal stability in the country. So with that, I believe that our view on our maritime domain should be, our strategy should be more holistic. That is all from me.
So in the recent APEC summit held in Korea, so in South Korea, I mean, like, what are your thoughts of President going up to Xi Jinping and the president said he had to somehow thought of breaking protocol just to go near him and shake his hand. Do you think what's the significance of that gesture in terms of our relationship to China? Does that change things or that just put China in a spotlight in that moment?
Oh, I think it shows us a very good nation that we are willing to negotiate with goodwill. We are not warmongers, and the president is representing the Filipino that we are good. We have a goodwill, and that the president in that scenario, in my view, acted like a gentleman. Something that the Chinese would have never done to us.
Really, yeah.
So it's something I believe was good in his end. It just shows that despite Chinese aggression against us, we still hope and we have a goodwill with them if they wish to negotiate properly and within the binding acts of the rule of law.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for sparing your time and being with us in this interview.
Thank you.
All right.